everyone, welcome back. I think today we're going to work on modeling the legs of the doll. So I just wanted to show you some views of the book where it gets really into detail with the underlying musculature to show how the legs should be shaped. So we'll try to do that. We'll see if we can do that, but one thing to keep in mind is that you keep them symmetrical in one sense, but also keep in mind that there is a right and left leg. Now, if you notice, they have the feet on the doll that they're carving out the legs. I'm going to leave the feet off for right now because I don't want to break them off while I'm carving and adding clay, but we'll build up some area for the knees, and we'll just do some carving to make the shape more pronounced. I want to start with the legs because they're bigger, and I think it'll be easier for me to do them, and then we'll work on the arms maybe later, either in this video or another video, but that's the plan. So I'm going to do feet and hands separate and just work on shaping legs and arms next. Okay, let's get started. We're going to start with the left leg, and it's going to be important to know which leg is which, so I'm just going to write on the styrofoam an L for the left leg, and then we'll put an R for the right leg since we'll have the styrofoam there for a little while longer. Eventually we'll be taking it out, but this will help us when we're modeling the legs because the outside and inside of the legs are very different. Now I'm going to be using a variety of different things. I have these different types of sanding sponges. Some of them are nail sponges, one of them is that 3M fine that I'll probably use once I get it complete. This is my favorite sharp edge for some parts that can be resharpened, but mostly I'm just going to be using this X-Acto, and I do have a lot of spare blades. And of course my favorite clay modeling tool will be there just in case we need to model some clay. I have my scrap clay here, and do spray this with water every day because it does dry out even in there. Alright, so we got basically this tube of clay that doesn't have a whole lot of shape. It does have the indent there where the back of the knee is, and that kind of helps us know where to start. So we're just going to take a lot of time here to carve this. I'm going to be using that book to look at the musculature of the leg so we can try to make it a little bit realistic as much as we can, but it is a doll, so it's not going to be 100% realistic. I mean, you could probably try to make it that way, but since this is my first try, we won't be doing that. We will be very happy if this turns out looking somewhat like a human body. So I think there are definitely things that we can do to make it that way, and I think probably for a leg, the knee is going to be key because that's where a lot of the detail is. It's where the leg curves in, and it's as you can see, like on the inside of the leg, it curves a lot at the top, but the outside of the leg curves all the way down sort of in a smooth arc to the knee, but the inside of the leg, there's like a bulge at the top of the muscle and then a space where it's sort of straight down to the knee. So they will look different, and it's going to be important that we try to make the two legs look the same. So that's the goal. Try to make the two legs look the same and try to make them somewhat look like a real leg. Because I think the symmetry of it's going to be important, because if they don't look symmetrical, it's going to really look goofy. But I feel like we can do that because this is a forgiving clay in the sense that you can add to it if you, let's say you carve too much in one area and take off more than you should, you can always add back, or if you get one leg off, you can always add, clay back to it. And the sanding, can help if you need to take down areas. So my biggest tip here is, as you carve, you just want to stop every once in a while, take a look, and rotate the leg. And as you rotate it, you're going to see areas that stand out that need to be fixed. especially these ridges that are created as you carve. But you can obviously get rid of some of those with sanding, but sometimes it's just a really large ridge and you just need to carve across the top of that to flatten it out. So I'm going to use two different techniques here. I think I slow it down at one point to show you, but one is when you're freehanding carving, like you're just using the X-Acto and pushing it or pulling it with your hand. That's areas where it doesn't matter if you, now right here I'm just scraping. You can see I can scrape. That way you don't take off too much. But sometimes I'll push the blade with the thumb of my other hand if I need to be a little bit more precise. But you can see here there's like a ridge. We need to carve that down, and you can do that with either your X-Acto or sanding paper. But just keep looking at it as you work. We're going to need to carve into the knee more on the back. We're going to need to carve out the different areas of the top to make it look like the muscle. But as you carve, just stop every once in a while and take a look, because if you don't, you will be carving too much. And the other thing you've got to keep in mind is you only have so much clay here. There's not an indefinite amount of clay. You've got a certain thickness and you can't go through it. So here I am just raking the X-Acto across this. This is a good thing to do if you just need to smooth out certain areas or take off just a little bit, especially in areas where you see some holes in the clay. Like if you can see that little hole there, we're going to end up having to fill that eventually, but I was trying to smooth it out so that I could get rid of that, but I wasn't able to. But that's okay, we can add clay. That's the nice thing about this air dry clay. Just wet it a little bit and you can add some more. So you can scrape like this, and that's great for just taking off a thin coat or smoothing out areas where you had some ridges. Or you can freehand cut if you have a lot to take off, or you can push it with your opposite thumb, the blade with your opposite thumb, push it up, and that gives you a little bit more control. So you'll find different techniques as you do this, but the thing is you can get out of hand and cut off too much, and that would really not be great, because I think every time you do add to it, you lose some strength in the clay as opposed to having a full piece. So working a lot on the knee area to get that to look right, I think that's going to make it look the most like a leg. I mean, the overall shape is important, but I think how the knee looks will be very important. I think, as you look at a real leg, you can see that there are indentions around the knee usually, although the outside is not as pronounced as the inside. It's a little bit lumpier looking. And everybody's knees are different. I mean, that's the nice thing, is you don't have to make it look a certain way for a certain type of knee. I mean, I'm kind of looking at the knee in this book because I want it to look like that as much as possible. But the other thing is I felt like I was getting a little bit out of the design with the knee area, so I put it back on the drawing and marked the top and bottom of the knee area with that Sharpie. And you can do this if you have to carve it, you can always add lines back, but having that there helped me see that I had not brought the indentation down as far as I needed to. The other thing is you can look at this with the other leg and mark it so that you do the carving of the knee area in the exact same place. So you can see it's starting to take good shape. You're going to have the calf be protruding, but it starts a little bit lower, so I had to take off some of the clay below where the knee indentation was so that it looked a little bit more realistic. So as you look at it, you'll see it's starting to, look a little bit more like a knee, but definitely more needs to come off in the back and also the sides. So just keep turning it, looking at it, carving, making sure that you look at it. I also look at this doll that I have. This is a real ball jointed doll. And I'm just kind of looking at her leg. I mean, her leg is not that super detailed, but it does give you an idea of like how it's not just a straight leg. You can't think of it as just a straight tube. It's definitely got curvature and shape, and the more you can make it look like that, the more it's going to look like a doll and a real person. I'm not going to make mine probably as sloped as that bottom leg was on the doll, but I think that was a little bit too exaggerated, actually. But, it's going to be your doll if you do this. So you make it the way you want. I think what I want to emphasize is just really more technique. And I feel like putting the clay on was a lot of technique. And I feel like the carving is a lot more artistry. Because, yeah, there's different techniques to carving. But also how you carve it, what you see in your head, and how you can put that into the design, the actual design, is the artistry. And that's where the people who have these dolls that make thousands of dollars come into their own, because they are artists and they have the ability to take that image that they see in their head of what the doll should look like, or even the feeling that the doll should evoke. Is it, a thin, whimsical creature? Is it, a sturdy warrior creature? Is it, these people have different musculature based on, what types of activities they do. If it's a dancer, they're going to have a lithe body that's thin but strong. Here I'm just remarking the knee because I had carved off a little bit of it, so I just want to keep it there because I am going to mark the other knee, and I think it'll help me keep focus on this leg as to the areas that I need to continue to work on. But yeah, every doll is going to be different, so you just decide, if you're going to do this, what's the look that you want to have, and then that may determine, is this doll going to have thick muscles? Is it going to be thin and frail? What's the final look? And that's going to carry over into, the facial features, the hairstyle, the costume that you put on the doll, or clothing. It's all art. That's the way I look at it. But there is techniques, obviously, the way you use the X-Acto, the way you use the sandpaper, the different types of sandpaper. There's some technique. But obviously, I think even as you can draw, if you can look at something and then draw it, if you can see the shape and then make that something you see on paper, then that's really the same thing you're doing here. You're just taking away from the clay with your knife the parts that don't need to be there. And if you need to add more clay to parts that need more form, then you can do that too. So now I'm just carving down the ankle a little bit. I thought it was a little too thick. I have to be careful because that area is not very much clay anyway, but I did want the ankle to be a little bit thinner. And keep in mind too, you're going to be sanding, so you'll be taking off some additional clay with that. So you just have to keep an eye on the thickness of the clay and how much you're taking off, and that you're not taking off more on one side than another. That's going to make it weak. I think it's nice to have the styrofoam in at this point because you do have the strength of that. I mean, it's not huge strength, but it is some strength that's supporting you. All right, so we've gotten down to this point where we've got a decent basic shape of the leg, and this, keeping in mind the thickness, I'm taking a look at that just to know how much I have left. And here is how it looks versus the non-carved leg. So you can kind of see how much I've taken off and the shape that it's taking on. And I'm actually pretty happy with it. I'm starting to have a little bit of hope that I can make this doll. One thing you want to keep in mind as you're sanding, always keep an opposite finger to press against the leg. Otherwise, this is not unbreakable. So if you press too hard without some support behind it, you could just break the leg off. So always either keep like a finger or your hand, or put it down on the surface of something, but have an opposite pressure to your sanding or carving as much as possible so that you don't break the leg. So just wanted to mention that, because there is a tendency, I think, to just start sanding away and holding it by the bottom, and then you could break it. All right, at this point I do want to draw the area of the knee on the other leg, because I'm going to probably sand off this line on this leg, and I want to keep this area noted so that I can go back to it. Even if I need to go back from the uncarved leg to the carved leg, I'll at least have that area the same. All right, so we have that marked. We can set that aside, and now I can just get rid of those lines on this leg, because that's going to help me see what else I need to do as we finish up working on this leg. Now I'm just trying to look at the leg. I'll rotate it and look at it and see where I need to sand more, and keeping in mind I haven't really worked on the knee that much. I mean, we have that bulging area, but that's going to be fine-tuned a little bit. We're going to have to work on that a little bit more to make it look realistic. Right now I'm just seeing, I have a bulge there, but am I going to need to add more clay to it to make it the size that I need, or am I going to be able to carve the area that's there and make it look proper? So now that we've got it down to this area, we can kind of look at it versus the knee. Now keep in mind, this is an opposite leg. It's not the same. That's the right leg. And you see how that curve is one swoop, but on the inside is a knob, and then you got the knob of the kneecap. So that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm working on the left leg, so it'll be opposite. So I'm going to work on getting rid of the bulge on the outside of the leg and make that a smooth curve, and then we'll work on the kneecap a little bit. So we've got this part right here where we're going to work on, that's the side that will have the bulge, and then the outside is the area where we want to get rid of the side bulge and make it a smooth swoop across. It'll be indented, but we want to get rid of the bulgy part. The inner part will leave the bulge. And obviously this could be different on different people, but obviously if you had a really fat knee, it might bulge. But I'm using this nail sponge. It's got a coarse side because I want to take off a little bit more than I would with the smooth grain. So I'm using these nail files that have the foam. They work nice because they sort of adhere to the surface and not flat. But just taking off that bulge and making that a smooth indentation on that outside part of the leg. And I think it's starting to look pretty good. Getting a little bit more excited about this project. I think initially, especially when I was putting the clay on, I was thinking, can I really make this look like a doll? So now what I'm going to do is draw the shape of the kneecap where I think it should be based on the general design. So it kind of is like egg shape. It's like wider at the top, and then it comes down into a more narrow rounded area at the bottom. So that area I want to carve out around and make that stick out more. And that's the next step. So I have 3 X-Actos that I use with different blades. This is the one I've been using the most. It's just your basic straight pointy X-Acto, pretty thick blade. And I have the economy size replacements for this, and as well as the curved one. And you can get those a lot cheaper because you do use them a lot. Now this curved blade is great because you can get into smaller areas. And then I have this little tiny pointy blade if I need to do any real fine detail work. I'm not sure I'll need that, but I do have it. And then I also have the handy clay tool that has a pointed end and a curved end in case I need to use that. So I'm going to mostly be using this curved blade here because I want to be able to carve but not poke holes in it. And if you have just that straight pointy blade, you can't really do that. So this is, I'm just using the top part of the curve, but it gives me a space to carve that that is, maybe a couple to few millimeters, but not having to take off a lot, which I would with the pointy blade, which would just, be digging into the clay. So you can either carve or you can scrape with this blade. Either way. If you scrape, it's going to just remove less. If you carve, it's going to remove more. So the area right around the knee, I was carving to make it protrude and stand up. But then if I need to smooth that down, smooth the area that I've carved into the other part of the leg, I can use the scraping method. And then you can always just stop and do a little sanding now and then, because that helps you really see the shape and gets rid of the more dramatic depth of the area. So just want to make sure that you don't carve too much though, because you know it's not going to smooth into the upper part of the leg. But I think using this knife is really helpful. So if you are going to do this, I would definitely have this curved blade as well as the pointy blade. Probably you could get by with those two. I probably don't need anything more than that. But if you're going to do this a lot, you do get these blades dulled very easily with the styrofoam especially. Not as bad with the clay, but they do. So get the economy pack. You can get those on Amazon. You get like 100 blades for a really cheap amount. And then you can change them as needed. I did have some scalpels at one time that were really sharp, but those two are the ones I use the most. So it's really looking like a knee now. I'm really starting to think that it's going to look really, really good. So we have hope. There's hope. Yay! So just continue fine-tuning and carving and smoothing, and you'll have your knee. I think the overall shape is good at this point. Now we do have these little divots around in different areas, and there's the knee I think needs to be a little bit more protruding in one area. So I'm going to add a little bit of clay here, so I'll show you how to do that. So I just got a piece out of my spare clay and just take a little piece. You want to wet the area with water. I use my spray gun to put some water on that divot area, and that'll make the clay stick to it really well. And then you just want to press it into the divot, and you can use your finger to smooth around the edges, and we'll just come back and sand this excess off, but that hole was not going to go away and I couldn't carve it enough to get rid of it. So if you need to, you can put more water and smooth it down. That's the nice thing about the air dry clay. And then I want to add a little bit to the kneecap, so I'm putting a little bit of water on that area, and then I'm just going to put a little blob on the top of the kneecap, and I'll smooth it down a little bit, but I will end up having to sand it. But it looks like it needs to be a little bit knobbier to look like a knee, right? So I just put a little water on it, take a little blob of clay and press it down on there, and we'll be able to use this to make it look a little bit more realistic, I believe. If you get any on the rest of the clay, you can just remove it with your fingernail or press it down with your hand and smooth it. We'll be doing a little bit more fine-tuned sanding. We'll use that 3M sponge once we get it the shape we want. But after this, we'll be putting a foot on. Not in this video. This video is way too long already. But I'll do the other leg off camera. Then we'll do the overall shape of the arms. And then we'll be coming back to do the hands and the feet in a separate video. So we got a bulgy knee now. That looks a little bit more like a real knee. Now up at the top, there's an area that is not even, and there's a little crack there. So I want to just add a little bit of clay to those areas. I may have been able to cut it off. I don't know, but I want to make sure it's pretty even, because once we get to the point of putting the balls on, it does need to be straight across, and you could either cut it off and get rid of the damaged area, or we can add to it now, and then we have more area to work with, because I just don't want to limit where we can make this leg fit into the body by having to cut off a portion. But we're getting near the end now, thank goodness, of this part. The leg was interesting to make. Now I am just going to take my tool and sort of move the clay around to where this is round, because when we start putting the balls in, we do need to have a round area, and this is just clay that kind of protruded over the top of the styrofoam, and it doesn't really give us a good picture of the thickness that we have left or the shape of the hole. So I'm just taking this tool to press that clay back that is covering the styrofoam, so we have a good picture of the actual shape of the leg around the styrofoam. And just smoothing down the area, and then really that's going to be it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think we talked a lot about technique, and we talked a lot about art. Hopefully you learned some from the technique. I think the art's going to be your thing, whether you have that ability or not. But I think it's coming along. I'm hopeful now that we can make this at least a good attempt at a doll anyway. So hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for the next video, where we'll be working on the arms and shaping those, and then we'll be putting hands and feet on in later videos. Thanks, and bye.